It was.
Everybody wants to see you walking over here.
There was a 6-car pileup, but it wasn't a pileup.
No.
It was just a 6-car backup.
It's just people lining up just to see you walk across the
Yeah,
street.
right.
That's how popular you are. You can give Bob Pollock a call from the Extension Service with your questions about lawns, gardens, trees, plants, whatever it happens to be. He'll take a shot at it here. 479-1160 or 349-WCCS. And we're into the last weekend of October.
We are.
Wow. So
Just like that.
Probably some things that we should be doing out around the house yet. Everything hasn't died off yet. So
no.
Maybe we'll get into some of that as this segment goes on. But we want to take a caller right off the bat. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. I would like to know when you prune hibiscus and rose bushes.
Okay, that's a good question. I was going to ask the question, too, about roses. So,
All right.
Okay.
Mine's running the same direction.
Yeah.
that's a dangerous thing.
Let's start with is the hibiscus a perennial hibiscus?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So it's otherwise known as Rose of Sharon.
Okay.
Right? And it blooms in the summertime?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So it's flowering on new wood in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So we can prune that anytime now, because it'll produce those flowers on new growth that happens next year.
Okay.
So between now and spring, you could do some pruning in that without really affecting the flowers.
How extreme can she get in her pruning? I don't know how much she wants to do, but 50%?
Well, I don't like to take more than, in most cases, we don't want to take more than 25% of the branches out of a plant or the foliage out of a plant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because we start to really do what we would call rejuvenation pruning at that point,
Okay.
Which is mostly left to the dormant season while the plant is still dormant in late winter, prior to growth in the spring.
Okay.
So if you really need to cut it back, then you really need to wait till that late winter time frame to do that. Otherwise, hopefully we've kept up with it, that we don't need to do a whole lot.
Yeah.
That it's just more maintenance pruning, that as we get some new branches in there or things clog up a little bit, that we can take some of the older ones out, or just open it up a little bit, or take a couple branches out to encourage some new growth to come to help keep the plant younger.
Okay. Now, what about her roses?
The roses, so they're mostly flowering during the summer months. Now, some,
Right.
And some will kind of rebloom, and others may just bloom once and be done, right?
Right.
So,
Mine are still blooming.
okay. So kind of enjoy those as long as you can.
Okay.
And then when the blooms are gone, if you need to do some touch-up before winter, say there's some weaker growth there, or maybe there, of course, dead stuff branches we can trim out as needed, just to get those out of there and get them cleaned up. But how long have you had that rose bush? Has it been really good and hardy?
Yes, it's been established for quite a while.
Okay. So that's good to know, too, because some are a little more tender than others, and so we kind of have to baby them a little bit more. But if you've got a good established one that's done well and weathered some of the weather conditions that we've had in winters and all that, I still like to wait. If you can open it up a little bit now, as the blooms are gone, just to clean it up and maybe make it more, so that if we get some heavy wet snow in the winter or something like that, those branches are going to be able to handle that. And then otherwise do the major pruning before growth starts in the spring.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I know.
And then that will encourage some new growth. If you cut back some branches,
Yeah.
if you need to shorten it up a little bit or open it up a little bit, you can get that done then. And then some of those buds along the stems on the rose will start to come out and make some new branches and go from there.
But that generally is what you recommend for pruning on most of the shrub-type plants, is wait until just before they start to bloom again in the spring, so late winter, early spring is when you should be taking a look at most of that.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
I know
Yeah,
that's the way with grapes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're going to be like with the grapevines. That late winter is the time to do the major pruning on that, because it's primarily going to grow new canes and then flower and fruit on those new canes each year. So by keeping up with that and not letting it get too much of a jungle, which it will, grapevines especially, they'll just keep growing and spreading, and vines will come off of other vines and just keep going, and then you have a jungle there, and then you end up shading, especially if you have it on an arbor. I think the tendency is to do that, just to let it go and completely cover that arbor, and then you get layers of vines up there on top of the arbor, which hopefully it's able to support the weight, but that also then can encourage some disease problems, and because we make a microclimate there where the humidity can build, and so we can tend to kind of build up some of the black rot problems, where the grapes, they'll get a little black spot on each grape, and then it'll eventually just shrivel up and look like each cluster will look like a cluster of raisins instead of a cluster of grapes.
So on the grape arbor that I have out in my yard, which is much like you've just been describing, there are two main stalks that come up out of the ground, and then they branch out onto the arbors. And every spring I trim them back pretty stringently, and they all come back and they completely cover the arbor. And for the first 5 or 10 years, we got a whole bunch of grapes off of them. Now we barely get any. And so that's one issue. It's not that the grapes are a big issue for us, but one of the things that happened was last winter, a deer, not knowing that there were grape arbor plants in there, went crashing through and actually broke off one of the two main stalks. Now, it generated again from down there with just the shooters, but not with an actual stalk coming up. Is that stalk ever going to come back?
Well, you can train one of those new ones.
You can do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So just start, and you can take even 2 of those if you want to, and just start and train those back up on the trellis.
All right.
Yeah, so those will be your replacement canes.
So come the spring, those are the 1 or 2 that I won't trim back. I'll just let them continue to be strong, and then they'll get thicker and thicker.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yes, eventually.
Okay. Until the next herd of deer comes through the yard and wipes out both of them.
I just stick a metal post there in front of that.
both of those main stalks. But that was my big concern this year was, okay, am I going to have half a grape arbor filled? But it shooted up through there. It sent plenty of new growth up there. And that's one of the abilities or characteristics of that plant, that it does have buds and is able to, when the cane's damaged like that, in most cases it can send up new shoots from the base and go. What else was I going to say about that? Well, and that helps on an established plant especially. That plant has a good root system on it, and so when it's cut off like that, then it has energy in there to make that new growth happen. It's got a lot of energy. It just doesn't know how to burn it.
If it had been a 1-year-old plant, or one you had recently planted within the last couple of years, it may not have been able to do that. It may have just, that have been the end of it.
Okay, so these have been there for 25, 30 years, so they're good.
Yeah, and the other thing we look at is flowering time of plants. For many plants, that's kind of the highlight of the year, or the reason we may have that plant is just because of its flowering or its fruiting characteristics, because it's showy at that particular time of the year. So that we can prune a number of plants like that based on when they prune. So if they're a spring bloomer, then right after blooming, then we can come in and do the pruning. Because as that plant continues to grow during the season, it'll make new flower buds and, of course, new leaf buds by fall. So by now, this time of year, the flower buds as well as leaf buds for next year are already set up on those plants.
Okay.
And so by waiting then till after it flowers in the spring, then we're kind of managing it so we can get the best flower show and also maintain the plant.
Okay, very good.
And it also helps to kind of do a little bit every year or every couple of years rather than to just let things go. It can be kind of challenging to come back in after a plant's grown for 5 or 8 years, and all of a sudden you have this thick, you've got 20 canes or 20 stems coming up out of there, and okay, now what do I do with this thing?
All right, he's Bob Pollock. There is another call on the line. I'll let you take that off the air.
Okay.
Because we're out of time for this segment.
Just like that?
Just like that. That's all the traffic delayed you're getting here. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. Bob's going to take that call over there. Fox News is up next.